Hello and welcome to the Friendly Pharmacy 5 podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Dixon. Today, we have a very special episode. We are diving into the science of self-care, wellness, and wholeness with an extraordinary guest. Sandra Tadros-Guirguis is a pharmacist, a fitness coach, and the author of the transformative book, Embracing Abundance, A Journey to Wellness and Wholeness Through Faith and Self-Care. Sandra's story is one of resilience and rediscovery. Whether you're looking to strengthen your self-care routine, navigate personal challenges or grief, or explore the science behind wellness, her journey will inspire and empower you with the actionable steps to create a life of balance and purpose. In this special episode, we explore the evidence-based wellness strategies that guided Sandra through her own healing and can support you in overcoming life's obstacles. So pour yourself a cup of your favorite beverage, find a comfortable spot, and join us as Sandra shares how she was able to turn a truly terrible and tragic loss into a life filled with abundance, and how you can do the same. Welcome to the podcast, Sandra.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm really excited to be here, and I've admired the work that you do here for a long time. And it's pretty incredible that we actually met virtually first and found we had so much in common. So I'm really looking forward to our chat today. Thank you again.
Yeah, likewise. It's great to have you. Sandra, so I recently finished your book here, Embracing Abundance. And I was just telling you before we started recording that I have so many things underlined. I have a bunch of pages that I've flagged. I don't know if anyone does that anymore, but I still do that.
I
And it
do
was
too.
just, do you do that? It was just such a great, overview of what happens when someone goes through significant loss, but also some of the good things that you can do to really help yourself. And so in this conversation, I really want to, I'd like you to give you the opportunity to share some of your story, but also we're going to go over some of the really important evidence-based self-care and wellness strategies that really helped you through your journey. But before we get to that, could you tell the viewers and the listeners a little bit about your story and the loss that you experienced? I think it was back in 2016, if I'm correct.
That's right. 2015. Yeah. The end of
Mhm.
2015. Very good. Sure. I'll be happy to. So, back that at that point, a younger version of me was, at a time in my life where I almost think of it as this like naivety, right? Like nothing bad is going to go wrong. I've, worked hard. I'm working in the career that I want. I met a wonderful man from my church community with aligned views and values. And, after all the fertility treatments, we've had our family and just, the world is ready and open for us. And then he got sick, and we were like, we prayed, and our priest came, and our whole faith community kind of gathered together, and we were like, it's okay, we follow the God of miracles. And we, I believed wholeheartedly that this was just going to be a little blip and everything was going to be okay. And he got better. We were like, praise God, this is amazing. And then he got sick again. Um, and then he got called home to heaven. And so when he passed, I remember I almost, in the book, you will know that I kind of think of myself as Sandra 1.0 and Sandra 2.0. And I think everyone here watching or join that's ever gone through something difficult can really almost crystallize. There was that moment where I got bullied, or there was a loss, or anything happened, right, that just kind of shifted your whole world. So in that moment when my late husband passed, and I was all of a sudden a widow, had this new identity, and a single mom, and my young children, trying to make sense of it all, and I just felt shattered. And that's really where kind of the beginning of the story starts, where you're sitting kind of in the ashes of your life, and you're like, what do I do? Where do I go from here?
Yeah, and I mean, it's the story is so profound, and you were able to tell it in such an authentic way. But I honestly like, how did you pick yourself up from that, or slowly go from, like, you referred to Sandra 1.0 versus 2.0, and in the book you actually refer yourself after this happens as dead Sandra, which I thought
Oh,
is there's so much impact behind that, because I think you truly felt that way, right? So
totally.
how do you go from this dead Sandra to someone who actually writes a book about this?
Yeah, that's is such a great question. So, what I realized was that, how there's always going to be a point where we have to choose, right? Which way are you going to go? And, we've worked in addiction medicine and with lots of different things. You and I have seen, all the different ways that people go with trauma. And so, dead Sandra, the idea was I was alive, but really just going through the motions. And so, anyone that's ever found themselves in that phase of life where you're just really not living. You're almost like that movie Groundhog Day, if you've ever seen it. It just kind of keeps repeating. You wake up, rinse, repeat, but you're feeling nothing. You're numb and just going with the motion. And at some point, I had read a devotional about. And so for me, the faith played a really big role. It was this Bible verse, John 10:10, where Jesus says, I came that they, like us, may live and they may live abundantly. And I read how the lady, it was after a certain divorce, she worded it so beautifully. Her name was Tracy Miles, and it was like a women's devotional. She basically said, like, I can choose, to let the bitterness and the resentment and everything just kind of keep me feeling numb and going that way because it kind of feels safe. It kind of feels where I'm at. Or I can kind of take a step out and say, no, I want to live again. And I think that that choice is such a crystallizing moment. And nobody's saying don't take your time to grieve the loss of your job or your relationship or the loved one. That's a healthy part of healing. You'll go through anger and sadness and loss and the Kubler-Ross cycle, but after you've kind of come out of that, do you want to stay there or do you want to move? And so the biggest first choice is I want to live again. I want to learn to love the life I have, even if it's not the one I wanted, or even if it terrifies me.
Hmm. And so you ended up writing a book about all of this. So what brought you to that point, or at what point did you think I want to write about this?
So I actually didn't, and I resisted it for a long time. So the way it kind of happened was the little steps were things like mommy and baby fitness. I would go to this workout where we would, bring the kids in the stroller or in their little, I forget what it's called. Those like kangaroo
Yes,
carriers?
yes. Hmm.
And move or go for a walk here. I started to care for my gut health because you and I, Lindsay, know how that's directly related to, our brain health, the
Hmm.
dopamine, the serotonin that are synthesized in our gut. So, and it wasn't like I was some chef, definitely not. My cooking is mediocre at best, but I started just making sure I had a fruit or a vegetable every day and then maybe adding sauerkraut for the gut health benefits and little things like that. So, I took kind of these little steps, and I had always been involved in kind of community wellness talks. And naturally, people would start to ask about grief and wellness or, exercise and all of these things. So, as I was out and I was chatting about them all the time over the last almost decade after the loss, I had since remarried, which I shared with you at the end of the sort of the book, how that all came about. And it was my husband Fetty that said to me, you know, you should put it all down in a book, right? And I thought, no, I'm a public speaker. I'd rather say it. And then he said these words that I've never been able to unhear, and they were, but what if it reached one person that wouldn't have had that support if you didn't write it down? And I
Wow.
was like, oh man. And if you've ever had like a visual in your head. So when I was my saddest, after I'd put the kids to bed, I would go and I would crouch up in the corner of the closet with one of my husband's old shirts because you know how clothing can hold like a scent, and I
Hmm.
would sit there and I would sob so I didn't make noise. So anyways, that moment of what if you could help someone, I kept picturing this kind of faceless person, but this image of someone sitting in their closet crying. And I was like, I don't even know if I'd be able to help, but what would I say? So I started playing with the idea, almost pre contemplation, if we're looking at the stages of change, right? And I thought,
Mhm.
okay, well, I'll just write some notes on my iPhone. So I'd be sitting, watching my kids' swimming lessons, and I'd be like, well, I'd make sure they knew about this and community. And, the assist program at CAMH talks about how community is the one protective factor against suicide. I'd make sure they reach out to people. And, eventually this list got longer and longer and longer. And I thought, well, I'm still not going to do a book. How do you do that anyway? But you know what? I'll type it. I'll type it out and I'll just have it. And maybe I could hand it to somebody. So eventually, and I really believe, with God's grace and really power that was not of my own, this full beautiful manuscript came to heart, and I thought, okay, fine, I'll send it to a couple of publishers, but that's it. If nobody wants it, I'll know, but I tried, and I have it here. And kind of the rest is history. And so that's kind of how it came about, and I'm truly grateful that it did, because over the past year, some of the messages that I've received, and people of different walks of faith and different losses, not even grief. Like a lot of times, people of different religions have said, hey, I experienced the loss of my health, and I found this really helped me. It helps me with my spirituality, and it's relatable. Plus, I like all the health tips and how you reference, like this is from Mayo Clinic or this is from wherever. So I'm grateful that it happened, even though I was kind of resistant at first for quite some time.
Yeah. No, it's an incredible story, and so to be able to write a book about it, I think is a whole other part of the even of the healing process, the fact that you're able to do that, right? One thing that really stuck out to me in the book is when you talk about, being feeling lonely. So I know we're in, like, an epidemic of loneliness. You just mentioned the importance of community, and I know in your book you said there's a point at which you said, "I actually felt very alone for a very long time." And I'm just thinking of viewers that might be listening to this and have maybe been through a tragedy or something very difficult, and they're feeling alone. Um, the importance of community, was that something that kind of started you back on the path to this Sandra 2.0 that you discuss?
Yeah, and loneliness is really hard.
Yeah.
You can be surrounded by people. I remember that feeling, and I really like send hugs to anyone that's feeling alone now. You could be with people. It doesn't Lonely doesn't mean you're alone, right? You just feel maybe not seen. You feel like nobody understands. You feel like you're just dying inside. And I said I wouldn't cry because I don't know if this mascara is waterproof or not, but you let me know if I start to raccoon. But really, I remember they asked Mother Teresa once in an interview, what is the worst disease that you saw? And I remember thinking, as a young pharmacy student, she's going to say diphtheria. She's going to say, where is she, right? And she was like, loneliness. And we saw it during the pandemic, and we saw it everywhere. So loneliness is hard, and it almost sometimes feels like there's nothing you want to do about it, especially if you're naturally kind of not in the mood. Like I remember finishing an exercise class when I pushed myself, and I would like stumble over my own feet trying to run out so I wouldn't have to say hi to people. Like sometimes it almost feels like terrifying, or just I have no desire. And so my, I guess, recommendation to anyone, for what it's worth, would be commit to connecting with people, but don't be shy to do it on your own terms. Like I remember the first time I wanted to go out for a coffee, I thought, man, I'm going to sit there staring into space. I'm going to be so doom and gloom. I don't want to be that wet blanket. I have nothing to say, and I don't want them to ask me how I'm doing. And, this whole thing. And I remember just saying it to someone that, I trusted, saying, like, hey, I kind of want to go for a walk, but like, please don't ask me how I'm doing. And is it okay if we don't really talk? And there are beautiful people in this world that just want to be there for you, that'll say, yeah, like, thank you for letting me know, because it's actually a relief for them a lot of the times too, because they want to support you, and they don't know how. And my friend Andrea, who is a therapist, did something with me on Instagram about grief, of things not to say. And her main thing, was, a lot of times we just want to fill the time and space because we are uncomfortable with that person's sadness. So things like, cheer up, and they had a good life, and let's go, and it's okay. And sometimes you just want someone to say, like, this is really hard, how can I support you? So you, as the person who's feeling lonely or sad or whatever it is, kind of giving support and cues to the people around you. Don't be shy about it. Most of the time, I think it's very welcome, right?
Hmm. Yeah. And you also, I mean, I find it so fascinating because as a pharmacist, going through this and, also as a mother, right? And I'm picturing you with these two young kids and, going through this just as a human being, but then you also have this pharmacy knowledge and this health um, mindset, right? And you start to talk in the book about, I mean, there's so many great scientific references and topics that you cover. You start to talk about, I think it's nutrition, mindfulness, meditation, things that pharmacists, people don't generally think that pharmacists would be knowledgeable in these areas or even interested. So can you just kind of guide us through some of the things that were really key for you, other than community, because we just talked about that, but just in the whole process of, processing your grief and eventually evolving into standard 2.0, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing up this point because in our family health team, I do a lot of support on sleep. So I have a lot of
Yes.
training specialty with supporting people's sleep. And as you know, first line is sleep hygiene, and that's hygiene is not like clean pillows. It's like just the term for people who are watching. Sleep hygiene is what Lindsay and I would use, with our patients to describe kind of evidence-based behaviors around sleep, right? Things like setting, your alarm, avoiding electronics, and so forth. But when people at first, when the family doctors I work with would say, you're going to meet with the pharmacist, talk about your sleep, people will be like, oh, but I don't want to take any pills, right? Because
Right.
that would be the assumption.
Exactly.
And so it's a great reminder that pharmacists are very much trained in what we call non pharmacological strategies. So, first line is actually what we call lifestyle or non pharmacological for most things. And sleep is so rewarding because a lot of research is showing that it's at least, if not more effective than sedatives. So, we work with all of our patients, and the vast majority with just working on these non-pharmacological tips. And maybe we can add a link to a handout or something,
Yes, for sure.
Lindsay, or on your newsletter. I have a nice one pager
Hmm.
of all of the things. And I would have to say, sleep, faith, community were the first three that I hit, and nutrition, and then I peppered in self-care and meditation. And the reason I find sleep so important is it just helps with everything. When you sleep well, our immune system, our mood is regulated. We have the energy to try to exercise, to try to eat healthy, and so forth. So sleep's a big win, and it's just even little things. Sleep is hard.
Yeah.
Like in our case, there was I was often, home with the kids, and then I'd get a call in the middle of the night, or I'd wake up and call the hospital and how are things going, and I'm coming back in the morning and all of that. There's the really heartbreaking reality. If you're missing a partner, you walk up to the bed and you're like, well, is that still my side? But it feels so sad to be on the far side of the bed, with your stuff. And like you're waiting for someone that's not going to come back. So I really empathize, and I've had patients say to me, the house is so quiet at night, I can't bear it, right? So there's the TV on, and there's all these things which may seem temporarily soothing, and also gets you to run away from the memories and the pain. But that blue light effectively goes into the pineal gland, turns off the melatonin, and we're just not going to sleep well. So, where can we carve in that hour before bed of some kind of self care wind down routine so that your cortisol can come down, you can sleep deeply, and go from there.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so important. And we do have some videos that I've done on sleep. So I'll put those in the link of the description as well, and
Perfect.
maybe a handout or something. So if anyone's looking for resources, we'll have those in the description of the video. You also mentioned mindfulness and meditation. Could you define that for people? So what's the difference between mindfulness and meditation? A lot of people still seem to think that meditation is just this kind of bizarre practice that's not really for everyone, but it seemed to really help you in your grief process. Is that correct?
Yes, significantly. And it's been amazing to actually see it coming up in more medical journals and
Yes.
really being spoken about because there's incredible evidence. So, to back up a little bit for all of the viewers, if you just think of your body having kind of two different nervous systems. So one is your fight, flight, or freeze. And so if you're constantly, your eyes are flicking open when you're trying to sleep, you're constantly taking out your phone and looking at it for no reason, you're tense, you've got neck pain, you've got shoulder pain, might be that you're just in this chronic, fight, flight, or freeze, your adrenaline, right? So the counterpart of that, which is, activated by this beautiful vagus nerve, which is kind of like a telephone line between a lot of the parts of your body, is your rest and digest. So, how do you get in that mode? Well, it goes through the throat. So, humming, singing, a lot of research about that goes through the diaphragm. So, that deep breathing,
Hmm.
expanding the diaphragm does it, and it tracks through the gut. So, we talked about gut health, healthy foods, avoiding processed foods. So, activating the vagus nerve and coming to that point of stillness. So, mindfulness, when you're mindful of what you're doing, you really are. Kind of present on this moment. You're not worried about the future. You're not stressing about the past. So, right now, I could mindfully be having this conversation with Lindsay. I could be noticing the warmth in her smile right now, how engaged she is. It's being in the moment. You could be driving and being mindful. Oh, look at the trees. How many times have many of us, driven all the way home and been like, I don't even remember, what I saw or what I did. I wasn't in tune. And meditation is when you're really reflecting on that. So for me, I would sit in really stillness. And I started with 3 minutes because I'm such a busybody. 3 minutes was all I could focus on. And it was really, I would do a body scan from head to toe, being mindful of the tension, progressive muscle relaxation. So raising my eyebrows, relaxing them, clenching my jaw, unclenching it, all the way down, letting the thoughts flow out, and doing that, just focusing, bringing my attention to the present moment of that deep breath in, deep breath out. Costs nothing, takes you about 10 seconds for 4 seconds in, hold, 6 seconds out, and to really just tether your mind to your breath and be in the present moment. It was huge. I would do it like 10 times a day. I would just catch myself like almost holding my breath, in the grocery store, wherever, and just be like, okay, time, time to reset.
So are you referring to like box breathing? Is it similar?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So box breathing is the four breaths, and so there's different combinations. Some will do 4 by 7. I like the four in and six out. I find just a little bit of a longer exhale helps me a bit more, but exactly like that, like the box breathing.
Hmm.
And there's free apps we could tell people too. Like if you want to get into this more, somebody who's listening and they're like, "Hey, I want to do a, guided meditation or calming breath meditation." There's a lot of great apps. I believe Headspace and Calm is paid, but you can double check. The
Hmm.
last I checked, Insight Timer was free. So you can check that out. And I'm sure on YouTube, guided calming meditation, breathing exercises, you find a voice you like, kind of like Siri or your car navigation. Find one that resonates with you, and give it a try.
Yeah. And let me just ask you, because I know that you are a very type A personality. And you even said you're always go, go, go. So doing these things, was it not difficult for you to just be quiet sometimes? Like, was it a practice that kind of you had to start out slow and then it slowly increased? Because I cannot see you just sitting for very long, like I think a lot of people can probably relate, even with our social media and everyone on their phones, that kind of thing. um was this difficult for you at first?
Very. Very. I was, and 100%, that type A personality is like, what could I get done in 3 minutes?
Exactly.
Where can I go? And you add on all these other things. Well, now I'm a single income, single mom, and there's an endless list of things. So to sit and breathe was kind of a hard sell, but I couldn't get away from the fact that I was so high stress. I was having reflux. So, in the book we chat about recognizing your stress tells. So one of the quizzes I always ask people, I'll say, in one week I saw 3 people. Which one of them immediately knew I wasn't doing as well as I thought? And it was like, an acquaintance, a coworker, and my hairdresser. And everyone's hand goes up and they're like, your hairdresser. And I'm like, yes. How did you know? And it's just, he went to wash my hair and something you never want to hear,
Oh.
and he said, spun around the thing. And there I am with my hair all over and the cape up to here. And he said to me, Sandra, like, what's going on? Like, you're not doing well. And I was like, but I'm not. And I just, burst into tears. And so I wasn't listening. Now I'm very careful. The minute I start to get headaches or I start to get a little bit of heartburn, I'm like, my body, which is the dashboard for the score. In one of my favorite books, The Body Keeps the Score, is all about, how your body processes that. So listen to your body and go. But to answer your question about, is it hard? Yes. So I teach classes at a gym here in Mississauga, and one of my colleagues was like, come to yoga, come to yoga. It's like a really calming type. And I was like, honest to God, the idea of sitting still for an hour is like torture, right? And she was like, just try to come. And I was like, you know what? Fine. There's no doubt I need it. I just don't want to, right?
Mhm.
And there's that saying, Lindsay, that's sometimes the things that we shy away from the most are the things we need the most,
Right.
right? So we're always defaulting to what is natural and we're used to, but sometimes we need the opposite. So, anyways, I went to this class. I kid you not. We got to the end, which is just like a cool down kind of resting face. And I started sobbing, like not pretty, like just full, like into my hairline, trying not to make a noise because it's so quiet. And so she comes up to me after, my friend, and she hugs me. She's like, that's very normal. I'm like, what just happened? And she said, a lot of times, especially the type A people, we try to stay so busy that you're trying to outrun your grief. When you are
Mm.
forced to sit in stillness, things bubble up that need to come out anyhow. And I truly felt better. And from that day on, I was like, okay, 3 minutes at night, I'm just going to add this to my wind down practice. I would put on, I have like a really great worship playlist on Spotify. I would put on Oceans or something by Hillsong, and I would just breathe, or I would focus on scripture or on the words and just kind of take those deep breaths to it. And now it has really become essential. Like, I can't imagine a time in my life that I don't sit still. Mind you, still still not easy, but it's now become something that I really see the value of and don't like to go without.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. So we were really trying to share with you, Sandra's story, but also some tips for you if you're going through some kind of difficulty in your life or tragic loss or something, because this is exactly what Sandra went through, right? And even as a pharmacist, I think it must have kind of caught you off guard because you just have so much knowledge, but when you're actually going through the thing, it's very different, and and there's no one telling you this is what you need to do. You mentioned in the book, resources for grief, and that people can often have difficulty finding resources, and you're like, that doesn't surprise me because it was difficult. What were some resources that were really pivotal for you?
Yeah, the grief, all of the grief. So bereaved families of Ontario, and then there were a lot of like individual ones. There was, Lighthouse for Children, and there's stuff online. There's groups, like I didn't even know this. So you can go to drop-in groups
Mhm.
or you can go to closed groups for 8 weeks. There's groups for general loss, and then there's groups for specific loss. So parents who have lost someone, or spouses, or children, or so there's so many communities online and in person that you can tap into. There's, complicated grief was important to learn about too. So, they talk about, not that there's any time and everyone goes through it differently, but generally in the DSM-5, they were saying that, if it's after a year and there's still, three, I think, out of eight criteria, there's certain things that you can look at if you feel like you're struggling much more than normal, if you're having thoughts of worthlessness or hopelessness, if there's anything that just feels like it's much more pressure than your kind of run of the mill grief cycle, please talk to someone. You can start with your family doctor, nurse practitioner, naturopath, whoever you see for primary care. And a lot of times they will at least be checking in on you. Maybe also check your blood work. Is your iron low? A lot of times that looks like depression as well. How are your parameters, and can we connect you to counseling to grief to community to support. So talk to someone. Nobody can help you if nobody knows, right?
Hmm. Absolutely. And the book does mention some of those as well. So we can link some of those in the description too. Sandra, you also mentioned how your identity changed. So you were kind of, this was forced upon you, right? So you were, you were married with children, and all of a sudden you're a widow. And I remember you telling a story of being in the dentist's office and you had to check off that box, and you were like, but I don't want this. I didn't ask for this. This is not who I wanted to be. This is not what I signed up for. I think that might have been what you said. This identity piece, I think, is really huge for people because all of us, I think, have been through something that has made us feel like this doesn't fit who I am, but this is what's happened to me. So, how did you move, into this new identity, and how did you move into the acceptance of that?
I had I had such a hard time with it, truly. Like, for all my life, these are your kind of identity characteristics. And I had read a book once. It's called Her True Worth that was really, really great. And it talked about, it was also a faith-based book, but how we have all these identity markers, but to be cautious of making them our complete identity because they can be stripped away, right? And so who are you underneath? And I was at a party actually, and someone said, tell people who you are without your profession, your accomplishments, your anything. Like, who are you? And you would see after everyone was ready to introduce themselves, people were like, who am I? And so I guess that's a fun activity for everybody here. How would you introduce yourself to someone, right? Without just strip apart any of those things that can be taken from you. Who are you? Like, in the sense that can't be taken. For me, I was like, I'm a child of God. I'm God's child. He's got me. I am his faithful servant. I, will share help in the world. I have love in the world. Nobody could take that. But, everything else, career, marital status, single parent, whatever it is, that can all be stripped away. So I started to really focus on who am I truly and intrinsically instead of what are my labels, if you will. And that helped a lot because then I wasn't so focused on, well, widowed versus marriage. I eventually ticked off widowed, if you were wondering, but it was grudgingly. So I would say that really buckling down to who am I was huge.
Hmm. Yeah. No, you can really feel it in the when you're reading the book and you just think of, oh, it would be so hard to check that box, especially at the dentist, because who wants to be at the dentist in the first place? It's just unpleasant. We have to do it.
Right? It's like
Yeah.
kick you while you're down,
I
right?
don't want to be here and I don't want to sign this thing and I have to do it, right? So yeah. In terms of how has this changed your practice as a pharmacist going through this? Like, I would imagine your empathy level is just on a totally different scale. How has this changed at all the way that you approach your practice or your patients?
Yes, for sure. I definitely from an empathy level, and definitely in the type of questions I ask.
Interesting.
So, as a side note, you'll appreciate as a pharmacist, you know how when we talk to women about menopause, right? There's like an MQ6 questionnaire that actually you just ask them at a quick flash. So, how are your
Right.
periods? How's your mood? How's your sleep? How's your bladder? Any incontinence issues? How are your vaginal issues and so forth? And when you pointedly ask a couple of questions like that, so much more comes out than
Yeah.
just like, tell me, how's your journey going, right?
Hmm.
And so I find that I'm a lot more sensitive or in tune maybe to, if someone's struggling with a loss, and how's your sleep with that? How's your appetite? Are you connected to people? Are you withdrawing, right? And so there's that piece, and then there's the non-pharmacologicals. I was always a fan, but now with like the nutrition and the gut health, I'm all over it, and I'll often have my colleagues write back like, "Whoa, those are really good recommendations." And it just comes from a place of like, here's everything that helped me, right?
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, and I always like to just emphasize that pharmacists really love this, right? Like this is probably my favorite thing as a pharmacist is, I mean, yes, the medications are there, and yes, they have their place, and they can do great things for people when they're needed. But there's so much that we can talk to patients about that doesn't involve medications, and maybe even prevents the need of medications, or can help with the reduction in dose of medications, right? And but you don't get that information really unless you kind of are able to stop and talk with your pharmacist, right?
Totally.
Some doctors do it, but doctors are always in a rush. Pharmacists are busy too, but I would say your pharmacist is a great resource for that if you're able to. That's why everyone needs a pharmacist, and it's one of the only things you can choose in healthcare in Canada. So you can choose your pharmacist. So
So
that's my
true.
little rant. But
I love it.
yeah, no, that's great. I was just thinking as you were talking there, like someone who's listening to this who is maybe trying to support someone through grief. You already mentioned that there's some things you shouldn't say, like cheer up and you're going to be fine. And I don't think anyone really wants to say those kinds of things, but like you said, it's just like they don't know what to say. Um, you mentioned that people brought you meals, and that was, I think, quite helpful, the support of your community. Um, Someone who's going through something difficult, how can we best support people who are going through some kind of tragic loss?
The best advice I would have is set a reminder in your phone.
Mm,
Set a reminder. And that's what I've started doing. And I'll tell you why. Because right when it happens and it's fresh, there is an onslaught of people, which is amazing, right? What a gift that all these people want to come comfort you. And there's nobody taking anything away from that. It's beautiful. But naturally, people get busy with their lives. They've come and then they kind of forget. You start to come out of your like numbness, say a month later, whatever it is. And that's when a lot of that loneliness kicks in, right? People don't remember 2 3 4 months that this is a long road now to recover. So for me, I'll put a reminder in my phone, maybe like bi-weekly or like once a month or something, to just check in. And people are so touched, 2 months after whatever's occurred, that you remembered. And it could just be a simple text like thinking of you, heart emoji, I'm here, want to go for a walk, anything, to just know like they haven't been forgotten, they're not alone, there's somebody there. So that was one thing I learned from my own experience.
excellent. And I cannot leave you without also talking about exercise. So you are also a fitness coach, is that right?
Yeah, I teach group fitness and I do personal training.
Tell me about the importance of exercise in this whole process for you.
How much time do we have, Lindsay? No, I'm kidding. So, exercise really, really, we could talk for hours about it. The benefits on every level. So, for our mental health, research shows that at least 10 minutes of a brisk walk, so moderate intensity exercise, can start to lower the cortisol and boost your endorphins. Health Canada talks about, 150 minutes per week of moderate to vigorous. So, that's not shopping. That's not 2 steps and then pick up a sweater in 2 steps. It's continuous. But the nice thing is it's at least 10-minute bursts is where you start to have that bone and all of the benefits. So we can fit in 10 minutes, and if there's mobility issues, look up sit and be fit. Use
Mm,
bands, sit on the chair. Like we can move, right? Any way that we can. And now especially building muscle is huge. So anyone that follows, Dr. Peter Attia, who has, all that research on longevity. And he recommends, the farmer's carry for
yes.
women of a certain age and men of a certain age, carrying 75 to, 100% of your body weight, for that 1 minute, or being able to hang. So this is not so that you can, be in a bodybuilding competition, but so that when you're 80, you can get your suitcase out of the trunk. You can carry a chair from the dining room, right? So I do this, so I can do this, right? And in older age. So building muscle has been linked with longevity and with metabolic benefits and everything. So, building strength, improving our cardiovascular and respiratory endurance, and staying with that flexibility. I always tell the members that come to my classes, motion is lotion.
Yeah.
Move as much as you can, move in different ways, try different things, do Tai Chi, do Zumba, get bands, use your body weights. but try to move really as much as you can, and try to get that the Health Canada recommendations. These are like for basic health. These aren't like, so that you can go do your Ironman. 30 minutes on average 5 days a week is really thought to be like maintenance, like brushing your teeth, like flossing. If you're brushing your teeth and you're working in that balance, maybe you balance safely if you can. 30 seconds on one foot, 30 seconds on the other. Use your non-dominant hand, right, to make new neurological pathways. There's so many fun ways you can add movement to your day. Squatting while you're waiting for the microwave, whatever it is, trying to move often, but trying to also have an actual scheduled plan. There's some really good, if you're at home and you're thinking, well, I can only work out at home. I have limited equipment. I don't have any income with how expensive everything is right now. What can I do? There's free apps like Fit On, Nike Training Club, Pop Sugar Active. Pop on a free app and let them take you through it. You can, just like in the pandemic when we did a lot of Zoom classes, we told people get water bottles, get your Tide jug and use it as a kettlebell, get your broom, whatever it is, your body weight, but don't delay starting to move, really. It's going to help with everything in life.
Yeah, so many physical benefits and mental health benefits, right? And like you said, there's so many resources now. So people who, even if you're kind of housebound, right, or you don't feel like you can get out right now, there's just so many resources that you can tap into. And you mentioned so many of these in your book, and so I just want to show people the book again. And so if you know someone who's going through grief, or if you're going through something difficult, it doesn't have to be, the loss of a loved one. It could just be something really difficult that you're going through. Sandra has so many evidence-based tips. She covers a lot of the topics that we talked about today, and even more than that, she even has a chapter, I think, where you talk about the microbiome. Is that right? Gut health,
Yeah.
right? Which is so important. So really, it's important to keep all of these things in mind when you're going through something like this. And I haven't seen a resource like this thus far, so I'm really glad that you wrote it. And Sandra, you
Thank you.
also have, you have an Instagram account where you're so great at creating those little short clips with tips on, fitness or health, or just some insights that I think that are just so accessible for people. So we'll link that in the description of this as well. And you mentioned earlier that you're a public speaker. And so I know you could go very deep on any one of the topics that we have discussed today. But for people who might be looking to kind of get to know more about you or reach out to you, maybe for speaking or something like that, where is the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, so either Instagram, STG_wellness, or my website, stgwellness.ca. There is like a book me for your event where people could just fill out like a preliminary, like date, audience, location, hybrid, in person, virtual, and budget. And then I will get right back to them and we can discuss from there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love sharing stories about pharmacists, but this is truly unique because you were willing to share your story with the world, and it was probably not an easy thing for you to do, but I'm so glad you did it. And like your husband said, if it helps at least even just one person, then it's worth it. And I'm sure you've helped hundreds, if not thousands by now. So Sandra, thank you so much for joining us today. Was
Thank
there
you.
anything that you wanted to mention, or anything I didn't ask you that you would like to leave people with today?
This was incredible. Thank you. I think with your support and guidance and really great questions, my real fervent prayer is that everyone that connected with us today and tuned in will leave just feeling a little encouraged. Having a message of hope. Things can always get better. You can take charge of simple tools, making smart little goals. It doesn't have to be a big journey, right? The mountains moved one pebble at a time. Can you pick one thing you want to do? Maybe it's just sit outside for some fresh air, every day to get that going. Maybe you want to add a new healthy food, whatever it is. Maybe you want to have that hour before bed where you turn off your electronics, whatever it is. Know that you are doing great. And we're so happy to encourage you. And we have Lindsay, constantly committed to sharing great information through the podcast and through the newsletter as well.
That's excellent. Thank you, Sandra, so much for your book. Thank you for sharing your story with us, for all your work as a pharmacist. And do reach out to Sandra. She is like a ray of light. Just follow her on social media. she will brighten up your social media and remind you to really take care of yourself. Thanks so much for joining us, Sandra. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. It's really my pleasure.
Awesome. Take care.